What to watch in Tuesday's primaries as Trump's endorsement is put to the test. Add AP News as your preferred source to see more of our stories on Google. Add AP News on Google. Add AP News as your preferred source to see more of our stories on Google. Share Washington app. Is there a future in politics for Republicans who cross President Donald Trump? The signs this year suggest no, and Trump has convinced his voters to defeat his adversaries again and again. The next test of the president's power to extract retribution is on Tuesday, when Rep. Thomas Massie of Kentucky faces a Trump-backed primary challenger. Massie has been a thorn in the president's side for pushing for the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files, opposing the war with Iran, and voting against Trump's signature tax legislation last year. Here are some things to watch as voters in Alabama, Georgia, Idaho, Kentucky, Oregon, and Pennsylvania cast ballots on Tuesday. Will Trump's endorsement continue to carry the day? Trump has repeatedly shown that Republican primary voters will follow his lead, even as his popularity wanes with the broader electorate. In Kentucky, he's supporting first-time candidate Ed Gilreen over Massie, who has been in office since 2012. Massie is trying to convince Republicans that they can support both himself and Trump at the same time, a proposition that has been tried unsuccessfully in other races around the country. On Saturday, Republican Sen. Bill Cassidy of Louisiana failed to even make the runoff, unable to repair his relationship with Trump 5 years after voting to convict him during his second impeachment trial. And earlier this month, Trump successfully dislodged 5 of 7 Indiana Republicans he targeted for voting against his redistricting plan. Trump is flexing his influence in other places on Tuesday as well. Read more in the race for Georgia governor. Trump is backing Lieutenant Burt Jones in an unexpectedly ugly battle for the Republican nomination. Jones, who comes from a wealthy Georgia family, has given his campaign $19 million. But billionaire Rick Jackson, a health-care tycoon, has put more than $83 million of his fortune into the race. Trump's endorsement power has rarely been tested against that level of lopsided spending. Trump stayed on the sidelines of Georgia's Senate race, leaving a crowded field of hopefuls seeking to take on Democratic Sen. Jon Ossoff, who's running unopposed for his party's nomination. But in Alabama, Trump endorsed Rep. Barry Moore for Senate to replace Tommy Tuberville, who is running for governor. A test for Shapiro in Pennsylvania. It's no secret that Pennsylvania Gov. Josh Shapiro may run for the White House. But on Tuesday, the Democrats' political clout will be tested in his home state, where he's working to elect a slate of House candidates that he thinks will give his party the best chance to flip Republican seats in the fall. Shapiro's endorsed candidates include Paige Cognetti, mayor of Scranton, Bob Brooks, president of the State Firefighters Union, and Janelle Stelson, a former television news personality who narrowly lost 2 years ago. As popular as he may be, Shapiro's endorsements haven't scared off Democratic rivals who are fighting to defeat the governor's picks and perhaps send a message that he's not as strong as he'd like to be with the 2028 presidential contest looming. Politically homeless in Georgia. Georgia is about to feature a fresh case study in the divergent paths available to Republicans who defy Trump. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and former Lieutenant Jeff Duncan were among the few Republicans to speak out against Trump's attempt to overturn his 2020 loss. Both are now running for governor, Raffensperger as a Republican and Duncan as a Democrat, and both are trying to convince voters to look past things they said in the past. Raffensperger is spending millions of his own money trying to reintroduce himself to Republicans by reminding them of his long career in conservative politics before defying Trump. Duncan, meanwhile, is trying to convince Democratic voters that they can trust him after announcing his prior opposition to abortion rights, gun control, and the expansion of Georgia's Medicaid program. The primaries will go to a runoff on June 16 if nobody gets 50% of the vote on Tuesday. Chaos in Alabama. Confusion may reign across Alabama on Tuesday as votes cast in 4 of the state's 7 congressional districts may not be counted. That's because Republican Gov. Ivy moved just last week to postpone the primaries until Org. 11, emboldened by the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision that hollowed out the Voting Rights Act. Republicans across Alabama, Louisiana, and Tennessee are now scrambling to redraw congressional boundaries to eliminate some majority-black U.S. House districts to maximize their political advantage. Over the weekend, thousands of civil rights activists rallied in Alabama against the changes, but the redistricting plan is moving forward. That means that ballots cast Tuesday in primaries for Alabama's 1st, 2nd, 6th, and 7th congressional districts will be voided, the Secretary of State says, while state officials restore a previous set of Republican-drawn district boundaries. You'd be excused for being confused. Alabama voters will still choose nominees Tuesday as planned for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th congressional districts, as well as for U.S. Senate and a full slate of state and local offices. Rep. David Scott's death is a reminder of Democratic gerontocracy. The late Rep. David Scott, D.Gar, was the 4th Democrat to die in office this term, fueling a growing restlessness on the left over the party's aging leadership. Scott, who was 80 when he died,